good morning. I hope that everybody's well and that you're having a good week. I'm aware that many of our needleworking friends are suffering in Australia. Australia is experiencing some extreme rainfall which has caused flooding, and you're very much in my thoughts and prayers, and I hope that the rain abates soon and the flooding recedes. It must be so worrying to be threatened with flooding and the loss and the damage to your own home. My heart does go out to you. Okay, so this week it's been another exciting week because we've had a new release. The very beautiful Ellen Martha Whiting. Now, isn't that just a fabulous sampler? This little girl has packed some really beautiful motifs into her sampler, and motifs that you don't see every day. And the colour in this sampler, those colours are mouth-watering. Now, when you look at this sampler, you may not say, oh, that's immediately say that's a Norfolk sampler, but this is a sampler that was stitched in Norwich in Norfolk, and Ellen finished this sampler on February the 3rd, 1879, when she was 12 years of age. It's very, very beautiful. When I first saw this sampler, I'd never seen a sampler like it before. And when I started to research Ellen and realised that she was from Norwich in Norfolk, I knew that that was one that we wanted to reproduce, and we were very lucky to secure her. And then it's like a bus. You're waiting for one for ages, then two come along. Within a week or so of Ellen coming to me, another Ellen popped up for sale on eBay, and that was Joanna J Welsh. And as you can see, that sampler is almost identical to our Ellen. There's just a very small difference on the verse. On Ellen's sampler, it's Jesus, permit thy gracious name to stand, as the first effort of a maiden's hand. But Joanna stitched on her sampler a servant's hand. Now, Joanna was 13 when she finished her sampler. Ellen was 12, and Joanna finished her sampler in 1865, 14 years before Ellen. But there's no doubt that this had to have been taught in the same school or by the same needlework teacher. And we've actually found that Joanna and Ellen both lived in the Timber Hill area of the city of Norwich, and Norwich is Norfolk's sort of capital city. It's its sort of it's its hub. Now, my glasses are on my head. We actually know a fair bit about Ellen. She was born in 1867, and although she lived in Norwich and the family were from Norwich, she was actually baptised in Kirk, which is a village in Norfolk. And curiously, in the baptismal records, the vicar who completed the record wrote in the margin of the page that Ellen was 8 weeks old, and there was no other child on that page that had their age recorded. There were 2 adults who were baptised who were in their 20s, and their age was noted as well. So obviously the vicar was trying to make a point of her age. There were a few other odd things about Ellen in the records, and I write about that in the PDF download. I have a funny feeling that Ellen's parents weren't married, and I highlight the oddities in the PDF for you to read about. Now, Ellen was a boot maker. She was a machinist in the bootmaking factory, and Norwich is renowned for making shoes and boots. She lived at home with her parents until she married very late in life. She was 41 years of age when she married William, and William was a starch packer, and I believe that he worked for Coleman's Mustard because they lived in Argyle Street, and Argyle Street was built by Coleman's for its workers. Now, Ellen and William, they weren't married for very long because William died in 1928, so they were only married for 20 years. And Ellen went on to live until 1941. She was 74 when she died. I love finding out about the girls who stitched these samplers. Now, when I acquired Ellen's sampler, she was actually in a fire screen, and we believe that this fire screen was the original way that the sampler was framed, because the fire screen is contemporary to the period that the sampler was stitched in. When the sampler arrived, Sandra had fallen in love with the sampler, so off it went to Australia, where Sandra painstakingly charted it. And then when she charted it, this model was stitched in the United Kingdom by the Contented Stitcher. The stitching is exquisite on this sampler. We acquired this sampler at the beginning of the first lockdown in the United Kingdom, and that was a really scary time for us. You know, this country was thrown into a very strict lockdown where we were only allowed out of our homes for 1 hour per day for exercise or for medical purposes, or to go to the supermarket for food. So it's a very scary time, and I know that this sampler brought a huge amount of comfort to the Contented Stitcher, and her needle flew. This sampler was stitched in record time. So our grateful thanks to the Contented Stitcher for stitching this model. Now, the model was stitched on Weeks Dye Works Zweigast based linen in straw, and it was stitched on 46 count, and it was stitched with Auvergne-Soise 103 silk. That's the favourite silk for this model stitcher. But in the PDF download, we include conversion for Soie d'Alger and DMC. Now, Ellen used a lot of colours in her sampler. She used 32 colours, and that to me is indicative that the classroom in which she stitched her sampler, there would have been a big box or basket of threads, and lots of offcuts of threads. So the little girl would go up and pull a colour, then she would go back and pull another colour when she'd exhausted the supply of the original colour. But all these beautiful colours really make this sampler glow, and you could imagine in Ellen and William's home, or the home of her parents before her marriage, that this sampler in its fire screen in front of the fire when it wasn't lit would have been a really central part of their parlour, and all these beautiful colours would have helped light up the room, bring sunshine into the room. I'm sure that, in times of candles and lamps, that, rooms were very dark, particularly at night. Now, the stitch count for the sampler is 250 stitches by 266. So if you stitch this sampler on 28 count linen, she would be 17.86 by 19 inches. And if you stitched it on 46 count linen, as the model was stitched, it would be 10.87 inches by 11.57. Now, the stitches used in the sampler were, cross stitch over 1 and 2 threads and 6 straight stitches. Now, the straight stitches are the little stamens on the fuchsias. 3 there and 3 there, and then the over 1 is the verse and the lady and the little boy's face. And on the original, the faces were stitched in cross stitch over 1, but what the model stitcher has done on 46 count linen has stitched the faces with tent stitch, and that's a really good way of getting the silk to lay smoothly without looking as if it's been squidged in. And if you do that, always make sure that your tent stitch is worked in the direction that your second leg of your cross stitch is worked, so that when you look at the sampler, you really can't tell that it's tent stitch rather than cross stitch. It's a good little tip. Try that one. Ellen is available for PDF download, and it's an instant download. She comes with 4 different versions. You have a 12-page colour, 12-page black and white, 1-page colour, 1-page black and white. So whether you want to stitch electronically off your phone, your tablet, your PC, or whether you want to print out either a colour or a black and white version, we're trying to cater for everybody's tastes. In the PDF download, the thread legend is broken down into 46, 40, 36 and 28 count and 1 or 2 strands. So we're really trying to cater for everybody. Okay, so that's about Ellen, and I hope that you will enjoy her. It's always lovely to have a Norfolk sampler hanging on your wall, and particularly such a different sampler. Now I have 2 other models on the table today. I have Amy Fisher. Now, Easter is fast approaching, and Amy is a really lovely sampler for Easter because of her verse. Amy stitched, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And that's one of the things that really attracted me to this sampler. That is such tender verse from the Bible. I often think that, or maybe not think, I excuse people's behaviour because they don't realise what their actions are actually doing, and the hurt they can cause. A very tender verse. And, this does make a really good Easter stitch. So pretty, Amy. I have this hanging next to my dresser in my breakfast room. And I love all the little different colours that sort of shimmer out of the sampler in the spot that I've chosen. It was really lovely to see Boomer's finish of Emily Ann Foster. Boomer's needles flew on her sampler, And you know, I did say that you could stitch this sampler in a long weekend, and you know, you could do this in 3 you know, lengthy stitching sessions. I tend to stitch, if I do get to stitch in the evening, I don't always, but if I do, I probably sort of settle down about 5, 6 o'clock in the winter because it's dark early, and I'll probably stitch to about 11, 12 o'clock at night. So that for me is a good stitching session. I know that we all spend different times sat down. If you do sit down for that long, don't forget to get up and stretch, and you know, move your legs so that you don't get blood clots. I'm always very conscious of that. Now, what else have I got on the table? I've got this book, Woman's Work, Embroidery in Colonial Boston. Now, this is a wonderful book. I just love the way that it has been written, and it's grabbed me from the first page. Normally, when I buy what is essentially a reference book, I tend to flick through the pictures and then dip into it in sort of small bite-sized chunks of time. But this book, when it came, I took it to bed with me, and I intended to read whilst I had a warm drink. I like a cup of drinking chocolate at night in bed. But you know what? I couldn't stop reading. And I think it was about 3 o'clock in the morning when I actually turned my light out. The book was written by Pamela Parmal, and the intro to the book and the inside front cover, it says, charming us with their whimsy and conjuring up a warm domesticity, embroideries from the colonial era also help illuminate the lives of the women who made them. A single work could take years to make. Its materials could come from the other side of the world, and its imagery could reflect its maker's deepest beliefs and her family's highest aspirations. Colonial women kept these accomplished works with them throughout their lives, proudly displayed them in their homes, and passed them down as heirlooms. Women's Work tells the stories of 6 women and how needlework shaped their lives in the colony's most important port city. From decidedly domestic origins, their embroideries soon became an economic force that promoted the silk trade and allowed entrepreneurial women to profit from selling supplies, drawing patterns, and teaching young girls interested in this mode of expression. At once a historical overview, group biography, and richly illustrated art book, this publication gives long-deserved attention to a unique facet of American visual culture and women's history. That just sort of, you know, sells the book to you, just reading that. There are 120 beautiful illustrations in the book, and when you pick this book up, it feels beautiful quality. It has, you know, a cover, it's hardback, and the pages, when I first went to turn the page over, I kept on thinking it was 2 pages together, because the quality of the paper, you know, is really, really lovely in this book. And Pamela Parmal, her writing style, it's so enjoyable to read, and she really draws you in to these ladies or young girls who stitch these samplers. So this book comes highly recommended from me. It's $40 and it is available on Amazon in the US, and I'm sure it's available from the museum that Pamela is the creator for, which is the Fine Arts Museum in Boston, and she's the creator of textile and fashion arts. And she also wrote samplers from A to Z, which is another book that I have in my library. So that's a recommended book. What else do I have? Well, I have this which I wanted to show you. Now, you remember this linen? This is from Foxglove and Lace, and this was aged paper. This is a lot smaller than when I last showed it because I have cut off the sampler that I stitched. And if you remember, I said that when you choose a fabric that has been vintaged, you have to envisage how it's going to look when it's been stitched on. And this is Eleanor. She is now stretched and laced, ready for the framers. And you can just see how the vintaging adds character and age to the sampler. And the vintaging is no longer as stark and dramatic as it is on the linen. So when you're choosing your vintage linen, you have to use your imagination of how it's going to look. So that's Eleanor. I hope to get her frame this week, but in lockdown everything is taking so much longer. I have been waiting now months for a new head. It's actually a whole lamp, but I have the floor stand already. The big lamp just drops into the floor stand, and that's my daylight lamp. There is nowhere in the UK at the moment that you can get a daylight lamp, the version that I want. I originally bought it online a couple of months ago. It was showing in stock, and then I had an email from the company to say it actually wasn't in stock. They told me it was going to be a month, and then they came back and said that it's going to be 2 months, which was sort of too long for me. So I cancelled my order. Then I started searching through the internet, and I found a company that was showing it in stock. So I rang them and I said, before I order, please could you confirm it's in stock? So they made a phone call to their warehouse and told me they would have it in a week, which was a little bit crafty because it wasn't in stock. And now 4 weeks later I'm still waiting for this light, and I'm told it's on a container ship coming from China. Daylight lamps are made in China, and there's been problems getting supplies. Now I have 2 lights. I have one by my stitching chair and I have one in my study, and the one in my study I use for reproducing, because obviously these samplers you need to look through high magnification to reproduce it accurately, because you have to count every single thread, every single stitch. And my daylight lamp, it's had a lot of use, it's very old, and what's happened, where I've been using it for reproducing, it's had a lot of twisting and turning and repositioning and putting back, putting down, and something's happened to the wiring, because I've had an electrician look at it, and it's the wiring in the head itself, and you just can't take the head apart to get to it. So what's happening, although it's working, as it's moving, the light comes on and off, and it flickers, and it's driving me mad trying to work through a light that's dimmed, and even when it is bright there is a flicker on it. I shall be so glad when I get the replacement through. Okay, I digressed a little bit there, but it's unbelievable the shortages that we are suffering in this country at the moment. Okay, so my current project is this one, which I showed you last week. It hasn't grown as much as I would have liked it to. I've had a few evenings where I've sat down and nodded off, and I've also had to do some desk work rather than stitching work. But here she is. I love this figure. And there is a little man growing out of the chimney pot on the house. This sampler is just, it's bonkers, completely wacky. This is as far as the sampler is going to come, so that's going to be the size of it. I actually have a dilemma at the moment with the border down this side. When this little girl stitched this sampler, when she got to the end of it, she realised that her border wasn't going to work as it did this side. She made an error in the way she planned her sampler out. It only requires a slight modification to get the this edge to run as this one does. So I've sort of hung off stitching the entire border because I don't know whether I can live with it the way that she ended up stitching it. So this sampler is either going to be a true reproduction and I stitch this side as she did, or I'm going to modify it and it's going to be an adaptation for the model. But whatever I do, if I stitch it so that the border runs right and the model's an adaptation, the PDF will include a true reproduction and the modification to get the border to work properly. It just depends how I'm going to stitch it, and I haven't decided yet. This sampler is really making me smile as I work on it. Just look at those colours there in this flower and this violet. She didn't mess around with colour. She pulled the brightest, boldest colours imaginable. Last week I was answering a question about storage, and it was meant to be about storage and silks. And I spoke about the storage of linen, but I forgot to speak about the storage of silks. Now, with soie d'Alger, I store my soie d'Alger in Flosstube bags, and I have big metal rings, and these are all in numerical order, and I have them in the 500s, so, well actually in the thousands, from 0 to 999 I have one big ring. But then when we get into the thousands, the 2000s and the 3000s, I split them into 500 on a ring, so I would have 1000 to 1499 on one ring, then 1500 to 1599 on another ring. When we get to the 5000s, there aren't that many, so that's on a smaller ring. And what I do, if I was stitching a model with soie d'Alger, I would pull the bags for the colours I want, and then I would put them on a small bag, and then that small bag I would hook onto the side of my stand, and I would work from them like that. When I finish my model, I would then transfer these bags back into my storage rings, and that's the easiest way I find working and storing the soie d'Alger silks. Now, with the spools, I started off with the acrylic see-through little makeup drawers that are designed for storing makeup, and they worked really well when I first started using 103. But as I built up the entire collection, I found it was too difficult when I was pulling threads to keep on getting all the drawers out and spreading them out. The size of my stash got to be too big. So what I do now, I store my spools in boxes, not by number, because when I'm designing, I'm not pulling by number, I'm pulling by colour, I'm matching colours. So I have lots of different boxes where I have grouped colours in, like I could have pinks, I could have reds, oranges, yellows, greens, purples, browns, neutral colours, so that I can just open my boxes, and I could have like 10 boxes open with the lid open, and I can pull colours from that. So that's how I store my spools. And talking of a Verrosoir 103 and Saphine, I have an inventory which tells me what I have got. And you can print these off from Access Commodities website. Is under downloads, and basically these are order forms for stores. You can't order them, but you can use the order forms to keep a record of what you have. So this is what I have in Saphine at the moment, and you can see that there are some blanks, and that's because they've got some new colours that have just come into stock. And there's some new colours for Soir 103 as well. And I'm very excited that my package of new colours and stocking up my existing colours on their way to me. I don't know if they'll be here for next weekend, but I will show you and run through the new colours when they arrive. I think that's it for this week. Ray and I are well. Ray's hoping that he will get his second vaccine shortly. I think mine's probably going to be about May or June. But we're feeling good, we're feeling positive. Having had the first vaccine has given us peace of mind. We are still leading sort of very sheltered lives, just going out to the supermarket and walking the dogs every day. The dogs are thriving. They are totally inseparable. Hugo is Bertie's shadow, and Bertie is so patient with Hugo. It's a joy. They have brought us so much joy, and in a way, one of the blessings of lockdown is that we have got to spend so much time with them because we haven't been travelling, and we are sort of enjoying every moment of their lives. They're with us for such a short time, and Hugo is developing into a super little boy, and Bertie is sort of teaching him so much, and of course Bertie is just an exceptionally good-natured dog. Okay, so that's enough from me. I hope that you have a really, really good week, and I look forward to seeing you next weekend. Until then, stay safe, stay well. Bye-bye.